Hey guys, Dean Gravina here, and today I'm with Lizzie from Right On Brand, based in Sydney. Lizzie is an amazing copywriter and has written articles for Time Out, Intrepid Travel, Cosmopolitan, and many more. Today's topic will be around two things. The first, should you work with a freelancer or an agency? And we'll also talk a little bit about content and AI in relation to high-end brands. Really interested to know what got you into copywriting, because as we were talking about, obviously it's not something that you just wake up and you're like, hey, I'm just going to be a copywriter.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there was a particular singular moment per se, but I think more like a series of moments. Like I said, like I always really enjoyed reading and like I loved magazines and I was really interested in the people who were writing the articles that I was reading. And I remember thinking like, oh, this would be such a cool job when I was like, 13, 14, 15. So I think that was probably what, planted the seed, like reading articles that I really was like, I could write this. I'd love to write this. But obviously the industry and, the world has changed so much since then. And I would say that my path to where I'm at now hasn't been linear. I studied a double degree in journalism and business, and I fell into PR out of uni, actually. And I was working in PR agencies just because I was interning at one and they offered me a job. And I think it was like that classic case of when you're young, you're like, oh, jobs, are they that easy to get? And I just sort of went where there was an opportunity for me. But I did that for a little bit and I moved to London with that, which was cool. But yeah, I basically realized after a couple of years that it was just not the career path I wanted to go down. And there was no one there that I wanted to like aspire to be like. So I took the first sort of leap out of full-time employment back when I was like 25, living in London. And yeah, went freelance over there. And that was my first sort of foray into freelancing, really.
That's really interesting. And
Mm.
I guess so. So as you said, you sort of just there wasn't like a particular moment for you. You'd had experience in PR sort of jobs, and um, maybe talking a bit more about that. Like, was it? Well, I don't know too much about your obviously copywriting experiences in
Mm.
space. Was it always like the online sort of stuff, or was it different like back then? Was it for, I don't know, like
Yeah.
magazines, or like what was it that you're writing, or and how has that sort of changed from what you're doing now?
Yeah, like the evolution of it all. So, yeah, it started with a love of feature writing and a real interest in feature writing when, print magazines were still all the rage. And I remember like I did an internship at Cosmo when I was still at uni. And obviously, like, yeah, the internet sort of really was taking over at that stage. But I started by getting into online writing. I did write some features for like print publications like Cosmo, as you said earlier. Um, but I was also in the meantime in a career in PR and obviously getting exposure to the online space. I did my first sort of stint into freelancing when I was back in London. And at that stage, it was still just a lot of feature writing. I was writing for an online publication over there. And then when I came back to Australia after a few years, I actually went back in-house, living in Melbourne. I went in-house at a travel company working in the global brand team. And I did some time there on their social media team and then some time there on their brand team doing brand strategy. They were a great company, but after a few years there, I was like, no, I really just want to work for myself. It was like that real kind of final thing. And this time, that was 4.5 years ago that I left that job and went out on my own, like for good. And when I did that, I was able to then bring in copywriting services because I'd had that experience and exposure being in-house. I had this real kind of mix of experience, I guess, like the feature writing, the online publication, but then the global marketing, the social media, so I was able to really pull all of that together to offer like what I do now, which is a mixture of all of that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Mm.
And I've done a little bit of research. I know that you've got a program, Use Your Words.
Mm. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And I'm
Mhm.
not sure at what stage that's at, if that's launched or not. But I'm quite like big on sort of mindset, really having the mindset. And I know you've got like a module talking about that.
Yes. Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, just before we get into like more content, and because I think this has a really, really big um role to play in what you're doing, and what you actually produce as a content writer, like the mindset of running your own business and mindset of, hey, when you were working for a company,
Mhm.
you've taken that big leap and actually being motivated to wake up in the morning and yeah, go day to day, if you like.
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it's such a good thing that you've picked up on, because honestly, your mindset is huge. It's huge when I mean, all the time, but I think especially when it comes to self-employment of any kind for any industry. And it's often really overlooked. Like that first stint that I mentioned when I was in London, and I did it for like 18 months before I went back into, traditional employment. And, I was pretty green then. I wasn't charging enough for my services. I was worried about not getting work. So I was saying yes to everything, doing it for cheap. So I was like overworking, getting underpaid, and I burnt out like really quickly. But then when I came back, a few years later, which is when I went out on my own this time round, I was like, okay, like what can I apply from those learnings to make sure that I set this up sustainably? And so I've always had a real awareness of that. And I've always really priced myself. I don't negotiate, I don't like lower my rates to get jobs out of fear. I take on jobs for businesses that I really like. And that the biggest difference between the success I've had this time round versus those learnings I had when I was younger has definitely been my mindset. Because and with the course, so I made that last year, and I've had 2 intakes, and I've got like over 20 girls in there from all over the world who are doing so well. One of them just told me she's like hit 6 figures in her first year, which of freelance writing, which is so cool. And people are like negotiating their rates. But that's been amazing. But I also do coaching with those girls who are sort of new to freelance, doing the business side of the freelance writing. And the biggest thing that always comes up is the mindset stuff, because it really underpins everything. If you believe that it's possible for you to build a business on your own, you believe that you can attract the kind of clients you want to work with and charge the kind of rates you want to charge, then you'll be able to do it. But if you're held back by fear or worrying that there's not enough work or whatever it is, like it's going to be really hard to build a viable business.
Exactly. I don't know if you're big on, and I mean, might be something you touch on in the course, like obviously, sort of manifestation and thinking like where you want to be.
Yeah.
Touching, touching on that. Do you touch on that in the course?
I personally like love that. I'm into all of that. I've always been naturally, just like I like to visualize where I want to go and what I want to do next. I don't like go into manifestation per se, but I do talk a lot about, we do a lot of exercises in that mindset module, that some people who are familiar with manifesting would be like, oh, I recognize some of these techniques. But if some people, because I think some people write it off as being a bit woo woo or whatever. So I do a lot of like really tangible, practical stuff where it's like you're visualizing where you want to be and how that feels, like picturing a perfect day, but then working backwards to set the practical steps in motion. So you're taking the right actions towards that as well.
Well, yeah, and I think, and a big thing, because I've worked with you on a couple of accounts now, and I know that, yeah, obviously pricing for something that it's just like, that's your price, that's what
Yeah.
you know you're worth. And I think that's
Yeah.
also gives you that confidence as well. And
Mhm.
you deliver a very high quality product because you know what your worth is firstly, but then you're also being compensated an amount that you sort of feel comfortable with. Is that how you feel about it?
100%. And thank you, first of all. And I think that's another part of with pricing. Like I have a whole module on pricing in that course for writers, because it's something that people struggle with so much. I think particularly creatives, there's a lot of like, limiting beliefs that society gives us around like, oh, to be a creative is to struggle, or you're not, that sort of stereotype. I think a lot of women as well, if they haven't had there's different conditioning for women around pricing and your self-worth and, making good money and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's sort of woven in for people really subconsciously. But something that's, really important is, yeah, like when you charge a price, that you know is a good price, you're way more motivated to do a better job. And everyone wins. It's just better for everyone, you know. Like, and there are plenty of businesses with plenty of money, because I've worked in-house and I know the budgets that people have for contractors. So that's been another benefit, because I'm like, I've seen it from the inside, you know. Especially like, yeah, like bigger corporations and whatnot. So, you know, yeah, when you're getting paid your worth, you're way more motivated to do a better job.
Awesome. I want to sort of
Yeah.
segue into one last question before we get into the copywriting stuff.
So,
I want to talk about your first, like, I guess, big freelance opportunity, your first big gig, if you like. And obviously you didn't know all these things that you know now, like all the things that you just mentioned. So charging your worth and not being worried about all these extra things. Like, what would you say to someone who might be like watching this and then they're in this particular circumstance right now, and they've just got like a freelance opportunity and they're like, oh, like, I've got to undercut the market and I just want a gig. Like put yourself back to the, mate, you might even remember a story. Like, I don't know what you want to share about that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there one comes to mind. I'm not going to like name names or anything, but there was a prominent publication who approached me to like author a book for them, and I was young, and that was so exciting. And you know, to have that as a someone who always loved writing, wanted to be a writer, to have someone come to you and say like, you'll be like the author on this. You know, it's very exciting. And I did the project, but I had absolutely no idea how to negotiate a contract or what my rates should be. And I didn't negotiate or push back on my rates at all. And it was a great project in many ways, but a massive learning for me, because it was huge. The project was massive, and it ended up being like really stressful. So that was yeah, like a really valuable lesson. So I think my advice would be, take a beat before you, like, even though this, something might come through that might be super exciting, just take a minute to like take a few deep breaths, like sleep on it, and don't be afraid to negotiate if the number feels really low for you. I know it can be really exciting, but yeah, keeping your own sustainability and like mental health in mind so that you can keep your business going is also important. Having said that, also, when you are starting out, sometimes taking one or two jobs on that are lower paid, or when it's I don't like recommend people do work for free, but if there are values to doing jobs that are outside of monetary in some cases, especially when you're starting out. So if there is a particular brand or product or opportunity that is super aligned with the path you want to head down, and they're like a big deal, and you know that having them on your CV or your portfolio will bring bigger clients, whatever, it is worth doing a job, or like, if it, depending on the size, like an article or two or whatever, like definitely not ongoing, make it limited. But in some cases it can be really worthwhile to take a bit of a pay cut to get a big brand on your name, and then keep going and make sure you're charging your worth thereafter. I don't recommend doing that on an ongoing basis at all, because there are too many businesses out there that take advantage of their brand name, but in some cases it can be worthwhile.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. We'll get to the sort of next section. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a really interesting one, because I think and this might be really difficult to answer, and I'm going to put you on the spot. I guess the question is, yeah, what makes a good copywriter? And I mean,
Oh
that's
my God.
depends who
Mm.
you ask, right? I mean, I love to cater for your experience. You deal with a lot of
Mm.
high-end brands.
Yeah,
What makes
I think.
your product like attractive to them as opposed to
Yeah.
somebody else's?
Yeah, great question. As you were talking, like the thing that just came to my mind was like just making your client well, I think there's a multifaceted answer, but I think a really big part of it is making your client feel seen, their brand feel really seen. I've recently just wrapped up a big brand project with a very, very premium client, and you know, they just want someone who gets them. They want someone who really gets them and can then word it in a way that they can't. Because a lot of the time, whether you're working with a new business that's got like a $2,000 budget, or a multi-million dollar business that's got like a $20,000 budget, and I've worked with both of those ends of the spectrum, the business owners are the ones that are like so psyched about their idea, and their business is their baby, and it's like, they've been working on it for a while or had the idea for a while, and it's like bringing you on is like, okay, you're like bringing into this, this sacred space that they're really letting you into, and being able to take like what, like sort of capture from their brain almost like subconsciously like what they mean and put that into words for them it's like a real privilege actually, and that's something that has always received good feedback, I guess. Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out what, just in summary, like a good copywriter is someone that what you can really sort of get, what the business owners really, what's in their mind, that you can.
Yeah.
And do you do that by asking the right? Because I know you've got some ways that you do that. Asking the right
Yes.
question.
Yeah. Asking the right questions, definitely. So I have a questionnaire. You've seen it. A branding questionnaire that I send to my clients as like the very first step of us working together. If you want to get tangible with the process, like I then have a call with them to go through their responses, and because sometimes people can like write things, that aren't in depth, or there's going to be way more that's in between the lines, like to be a good copywriter, you need to read in between the lines, and put them into the right lines, if you will.
For sure. So building the relationship, asking the right questions.
Yeah.
It's more than just the copy.
It's way more than the copy, because the copy, the words that you see on a website or email or social, whatever, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's literally the tip of the iceberg. Underneath, what you can't see is way bigger. And that's what makes the whole thing up, like words come from emotion and connection, and, to be able to connect with the business owner, see what their vision is, but then also have an understanding as an outsider of their market and their customer, with that has like a fresh set of eyes. That's really valuable to people as well, being an external party. But yeah. Yeah.
Yes, in terms of your articles, now, is there something that you do? I mean, you don't have to reveal all the secrets, but
That's
maybe
fine.
one secret. You might have one secret. So is there something that, in terms of the way you structure your copy, or is there something that you've learned along the way that you've always applied and that you've taught others in your copywriting journey? That's a good way to sort of format for online, or is this something that, I know it's putting you on the spot, but yeah.
No, that's okay. Um, oh, this is a hard one. It's funny because in my course, right, like I don't teach people how to write. I teach people how to do the business side of things and grow it and manage all of that. I think, I mean, there are obviously like strategies you can employ, but I think it just really varies per subject, per publication, per client. Like some people really want like an emotive style of writing and something, and you can get that sense when you're having that conversation with them and give them some really emotive options. And some people want something more direct, something more dry. It really depends. But if I'm writing feature articles, for example, that is like my idea, something that I'm exploring for me. I'm not writing for a client. I always just set the scene really viscerally as much as I can straight off the bat. Like if it's a travel article or like a health piece, or, I've written a bunch of different topics, I always like the more impactful and emotive I can get in that very first line to really bring the reader in, the better.
I think you just said it there. What I guess the answer is like you being quite versatile.
Yes.
Like you're able to change. Like I know a lot of writers and they say, hey, this is how I write. And it's
Mm.
like this is what I write about. It's like if it's anything else, like whoa, it's like way too much. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Like some people, like when it comes to niching or getting a niche, like I have never niched down, and some do, and it works for them, and that's great. It's funny, like there's, sometimes there's a lot of advice for new writers that are like, oh, get a niche because you can charge more, you can whatever. And if there is something you're super interested in naturally, then absolutely like niche in that. But for me, like I just, as a person, I like variety and I like to write about all different kinds of things. And, I find the having different experience actually complements the other things that you write about because it can all weave in together. There are definitely like, I've been at this for years now. So there are definitely like, one job with a client from a certain industry might lead to one in a similar industry and you start to build up a bit of a bank. But yeah, I've never like consciously niched. And I think that that's actually served me really well.
Yeah, 100%. So I think you touched on a couple of points there. Asking the right questions, being able to sort of be a bit more versatile and accommodate for more than what you probably should sometimes in
Yeah.
terms of styles. I think that's probably, you can apply that to any industry. Now, we sort of met through a process where I was
Mm-hmm.
actually sort of cold calling copywriters. And
Mm-hmm.
we were previously, the company that I was working for, we were previously working with an agency.
Mm.
So the struggle, we obviously there were certain communication struggles, getting the right questions, getting the right copy. Pricing was
Mm.
obviously high without us seeing the benefit of that. Question for you, yeah, should you work with a freelancer rather an agency?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the answer is probably going to vary case by case. I think the instances where an agency might be a good call is if you are someone who is needing a whole overhaul or like a whole, you want someone who can help you with design, copywriting, and like paid ads, or, like you need a list of comprehensive services. Having said that, though, often the agencies are just subcontracting us freelance writers a lot of the time. But freelance writers can provide so much. Like, obviously, I'm not biased, but like I've worked in agencies, I've worked in house, and I've worked on a freelance basis. And in terms of, agencies are going to add a premium, are going to add a markup
Yeah.
onto everything. So if you're wanting to get, but freelancers can provide the same services and the same quality of service with way less fuss. Like it's just one-on-one. So it's just like super easy. You can jump on a call. Like you don't have to go through a big process or whatever to like get in touch with each other. Like that's something that's a lot easier. And you just work in that basis one-on-one and you still get the same quality of service. It's just on a freelance basis rather than, through a big agency with a big premium.
You're very biased about that, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you are someone who needs a lot of different services, an agency can be a great shout, if you need like PR and, a whole bunch of different ones. But if you're needing something just niche, like just someone to do words and strategy for words, or even someone to do design and strategy for design, working with freelancers, like a lot of the time, like they've come from agency themselves, so they're going to have the same skill set and deliver the same product, but it'll just be cheaper.
I think my opinion on that is I definitely agree with you. I felt in the experience that we had, we were contracting out a lot of work,
Yeah.
like really like a lot across different sort of portfolios, if you like. And it was all
Mm-hmm.
going to one agency. So we're talking probably it was hundreds of articles throughout the year. And the issue is that this particular agency was taking work from us and other people as well, and they hit a capacity point where they couldn't actually keep up. Now, I think
Right.
the good thing about working with an agency when they're not so overloaded is that, yeah, they can, you're not going to have that issue where the freelancer's like, oh, I'm not working with you anymore.
Yeah, so there's more contracts in place. It's a little bit more secure, a little bit more formalized sort of way of work.
A little bit more because
Yeah.
as much as it's great to work with a freelancer in a sense, you've got that personal connection. That connection can also be broken just
Yeah.
as easy.
Yeah, I see that.
And yeah, what are your thoughts? Sorry to throw you the other side because
No,
obviously,
no, I like that. I was actually going to ask you from your perspective, what do you prefer? But yeah, I see that. I think I mean, everything has
Pros and cons.
pluses and minuses, right? Yeah, I think it's yeah, depending on your budget and your volume of work and the task at hand. Like if you do have like a huge volume of work that is too much for one person, yes, an agency is gonna be better. If you do prefer the structure, of working with an agency, like that might be a better option for you. But in terms of like I've worked with like really big companies that would have paid an agency like 3+ times what they've had to pay me to do the same thing, you know? Like it's so yeah, I think depends what your priorities are. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the freelancer. It depends on the
Yeah.
agent you work with. It depends. It's
Yeah.
factors, but I
A
think
lot of variables. A lot of
yeah,
variables.
I
Yeah.
personally have a lot of like good experience, like a lot better experiences working with freelancers personally. Uh,
Yeah.
and the thing is, like I've worked for different agencies, and I try and always give that service within the agency that I work for.
Yeah.
It's due to the fact that because I know what it's like from a customer point of view when the person that you're actually working with is too far out of reach. That gives it can
Yeah.
give a taste in people's mouths about that, and it ruins a relationship, the dynamic. Um,
Yeah.
cool. And I guess
Yeah.
in terms of copy, in terms of AI, in terms of agency and freelance there's all these
Mm.
like there's all this stuff about AI and technology and automation and workflows. Where are
Mhm.
you at with that?
I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Look, there is a lot of fear in the industry, and it's totally understandable fear. I myself, I would say I went through like multiple stages of grief, at the end of 2022 when ChatGPT was launched. My partner was like, oh my God, like this is amazing, and I was like, properly in denial, like, oh, it's nowhere near as good as us. And like, what is this, and then I was like, oh my God, it's going to take so many jobs that, oh, the kids aren't going to be learning how to write in schools. And like, it was like that whole like,
Yeah,
journey, and then I landed on acceptance. And I was like, you know what, it's coming, it's here, and it's only going to become more prevalent. So like you can either deny that and reject it and get left behind, or fully embrace it and add it to your skill set as a writer, and get ahead, And so that's like what I teach the writers that I work with as well. There's that quote, there's that meme that's been doing the rounds of like AI isn't going to replace your job, but someone who knows how to use it might. And I think that rings so true. I do think there will be a lot of like low cost, low budget businesses that will just rely on AI. And I say to the writers, like, they're not the clients you want to work with anyway, because they don't value your expertise. As you said earlier, like, there's so much more to copy than the copy. And like that is where the people can still really come in. Like you have to develop key messaging and tone of voice and unique selling points. Like I use ChatGPT all the time. I use it all the time, and I use it as like a brainstorming partner. If I'm like writing about a new area, I'll ask it to summarize key points for me. If I'm stuck on some synonyms in a particular context, I'll use it for that. And I keep up with all the tools because I want to. I think it's really important for us to do that. But yeah, it's still not at anywhere near the level that I would say is it good enough as a writer who has a high bar, have a really high quality bar, And I think that's where the businesses that still value that will continue to really stand out, because you still need someone who's got a high quality bar to measure like that's a generic sentence and that's not, and that takes someone who's got that expertise already, if that makes sense.
yeah. Well, it makes sense, but I mean, I guess for people that are still, what's the word like? They're thinking about, oh, AI can do the same thing. Could you elaborate a
Mm.
bit? Like, I know you said about a generic sentence, right? That's like a really common thing that AI can't really do. It can't
Mm.
be as creative as we can. Is there anything else that that you sort of think, or like how else are you sort of using it to your advantage, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so I'm using it in those ways I say, like I'll often just have a window open and use it to like brainstorm or help me kind of kick off some creative ideas. Or if a sentence is feeling sticky, I might like plug it in and ask it to like rework some things for me. So it's kind of like having like a junior writer, like kind of person to bounce off, you know. But I would never ever be satisfied as it is at this stage. Like it's still nowhere near what I would be satisfied with, you know, in terms of the quality of it. But I think as well, like a lot of businesses, and oh, there's also like from an SEO perspective, I think like Google love, I don't think Google loves fully AI generated copy. I know it can detect it, and there's a lot of tools now that can detect it. But I think there's a real opportunity for, you know, people who even like new to it or not, anyone who can string a sentence together well, it's still a really rare skill ultimately. And there's going to be so much of the same sounding copy out there when if people are using this technology, that there's such an opportunity for people to really stand out and start thinking differently, you know.
Yeah, so it's actually made things easier for you, because like if everyone's using ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is all, it's all going to sound like ChatGPT, and then
Yeah.
someone throws out something new.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And it's interesting from a client perspective, you know, I have had a real mix of clients, some that are like that first client that we met on together were like strong, heavy, no AI, you know,
No,
then I've had other clients, no AI, and then I've got others that are like, use AI, fully use AI and see how quick you can go, you know, and so there's a real mix of appetites for it, I'd say as well. And I think it particularly in the premium space, in that high end space, I think there'll be uh, more of a not reluctance, but I think people in those areas, like they still want to be unique and niche, and they don't want to skimp. They don't want to. They're not trying to like cut corners to save cash. They don't want to be like everyone else. And
already over.
ChatGPT, yeah. So I think that those kinds of high end clients will still really have a very big appetite for human copy.
Last question for you. Where do you think the copywriting industry is going in the next 10 years? Obviously, we know that AI has changed the copywriting landscape. There's heaps of like digital copywriters that are in Bali, in Europe, in Australia, wherever, in London. Um, just talking about that, like where do you think things are going in the next sort of 10 years with everything?
Yeah. I mean, God, 10 years is like 10 years feels really far, but like who bloody knows in 10 years? But in 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
I definitely think that yeah, like AI is obviously going to be a massive component, and anyone who is wanting to build a career in copywriting with longevity should absolutely embrace it and get on board with it, and definitely, yeah, like use it to your advantage. But I still strongly believe that businesses, smart businesses, will need people who are good with words. They will need humans who can do what I said earlier in terms of sitting down with the founder and extracting those things in their brain that are almost like subconscious and distilling it in a way that really connects with their consumer. And that's a real human activity, you know? So I think, you know, definitely, I mean, there's even shifts now that you're seeing around people sort of moving away from websites and moving more towards like link in bio for those kinds of businesses. Like that sort of thing might change in terms of like how much copy is required of copywriters, or like the kind of copy people want. Obviously, social is still going to be a really big part. There are over 2 million businesses in Australia alone, and that's so many people who need words. I've also seen a lot of businesses start to create their own blogs that are taking on more of a news style, feature article style approach, you know, those longer form thought provoking pieces, you know, that are tailored to their brand rather than just sort of the generic blogs, or maybe as well as those generic blogs. So there's a lot of opportunity there for writers who like that kind of long form journalistic style. But in terms of your question around travel, I think, yeah, in general, the future of work is looking pretty remote. I think past, you know, in a post-COVID world, you know, remote work has been proven really viable, and the stats are very much showing that that's what people want. So being able to, you know, work from anywhere is amazing. It's one of the biggest reasons I, you know, love working for myself, because you can be in, you know, all these different locations all over the world and take inspiration from them, and the people you meet, and all of that can really feed into making you a stronger writer.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess a couple of things on that, really getting inspiration from different locations that makes you a better writer. Um, being able to freelance, being able to just choose who your clients are, that makes you a better writer.
Mhm.
There's so many things that really does. But I guess, yeah, really, do you think that obviously most things are quite standard now, standard blog posts, people go on a website, there's a blog section, every website has that. Do you see that, or has ever been a thought in your mind in the next 10 years, everything's turning to voice,
Mhm.
and the way people sort of consume, it's obviously UGC now. UGC content is the thing.
Mhm.
Where do you think the actual writing is going? Do you think that we're still going to be reading these blog posts, reading these magazines, or are we going to be writing for all writers are going to be writing for UGC videos or for AI for an AI to read? I don't know. What your thoughts are? Yeah.
I think there'll definitely be a proliferation of opportunities in terms of, yeah, like you might be writing for video, like that's something I'm already doing more of, or writing, yeah, like writing for audio content or podcast writing, like, jobs in that space. There's like AI will create so many more jobs as well around like prompting and editing. There might be, a lot of people who are kind of moving up that rung to the editor roles from like editing what AI is producing on a lower sort of level. But I think there will always be an appetite for the written word. I think it's just really human. And even though like technology might come in and, impact our attention spans and change things a little, like there will still be people who love to read, love to write, and the experience. And if anything, there might actually be, and there is already, like, you see in places like Amsterdam and progressive cool European cities like that, like they have no Wi-Fi cafes where
Right.
people can go, and there's no Wi-Fi. You can't have tech. It's like, and they're packed because people crave connection. Like there could really be a big sort of push back to the manual, analog, like pen and paper, hard copy books. That's a real pleasure. Magazines, like in Australia, we're already seeing magazines like Our Magazine has just opened again after shutting down. It's back in stores in print, so there is also a real sort of pushback. So I think it'll just kind of be a bit of a proliferation. There'll be these more opportunities that tech is going to create, but then there'll also still be there'll always be a place for those original like reading and writing opportunities.